Well, so it's probably going to be a small but very classy crowd today. So let's see. Carly, do you know Jason and Kelly?
Hi, Carly.
Hi. I know Kelly from the other sessions that we've done, but not in person.
And do you
I
know
don't think I know
Jason?
Jason.
Okay, so why don't you guys introduce yourself? Kelly, who are you, since you're in the middle of my screen?
So Carly, you probably know, but I'm with Rumble, so I'm the Chief Operating Officer, and just have a background in a lot of nonprofit work and corporate accounting before that.
Including Marfa, which is like as arts as it comes, which is very cool.
Yeah, because Carly, you're with the Gunnison Arts Center, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in the arts for 10 years, so
cool.
before I moved here.
However, she says she isn't joining boards, Carly.
I'm a terrible board member. You don't want me as a board member ever.
So why don't you introduce yourself, Carly?
Okay, so I am the director at the Gunnison Arts Center. And I've been there for 9 years now.
Ooh.
Which is a really long time for me. And for the Arts Center. So yeah, I just got done working in the gallery. It was really noisy because we're doing a restoration project on our 138-year-old building. So they had the cement chisels out, breaking off some of the cement to reveal some historic stone. So
Wow.
Yeah.
I came very close yesterday to calling 911 because I went past the Arts Center and there was a guy outside it with like a pickaxe and he was chipping on the building. And I thought, what, how dare he? Anyway, so Carrie, you just joined us and we're just doing introductions because it's a small crowd. Do you want to just introduce yourself?
I'm Carrie and I work for the City of Gunnison in the Community Development Department. And I'm just kind of sitting in on all of the subgroup meetings to kind of just keep in touch with what the different groups need or what we can do as the city over as a whole to help out.
That's great. And I know Russ is very interested in, so he calls it social emotional connections. So this is a very topical session for you guys. And let's see, I think you probably all know this. Well, maybe Carrie doesn't. Pam, do you want to introduce yourself real quickly?
Sure. Pam Montgomery, and I'm the Executive Director of the Community Foundation. Nice to meet you by Zoom.
Alicia?
Alicia Corliss, I'm the Administrative Coordinator for the Community Foundation.
And there's Lauren.
Lauren Kugler with the Community Foundation.
I'm Mario Yule with the Community Foundation, and drum roll please, Jason, our guest today. Do you want to introduce yourself and sort of take it away in whatever direction it goes? Oh, and here's Jenny. We'll wait for her. You all probably know Jenny's the Executive Director of the Gunnison Valley Health Foundation.
All right. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks so much. I really appreciate you joining us. Before everyone else got on, we were saying what a gorgeous day it is. And so tough choice to either go outside or to do one more Zoom meeting. I really appreciate you making this choice. So I guess by way of introduction, I have a life coaching business, but life coaching isn't maybe the best way to capture what I do. I really help people live the lives that they would like to live. I help people get unstuck. I help people experience more joy and happiness in their lives and more resilience with the ups and downs of life. And I do that by sharing an understanding that was shared with me, I guess it's 17 years ago now, that really changed my life. And after wrapping up a career as a school founder and principal, I asked myself, what I want to do when I'm a grown up this time. And I realized that after lots and lots and lots of formal education and getting a PhD, that the most powerful learning that I did took place over 3.5 days with a mentor of mine 17 years ago who shared this understanding with me. So I decided that I wanted to take another look, and I did a deep dive, and I did a lot of retreats and training with a lovely group of mentors who embody this understanding more than just teach it. They live it and share it. And so that's what I do now. I have lived in the Gunnison Valley for about 10 years. And I just think we are some of the luckiest people around that we get to live here. So, and I was invited today to share with you some thoughts on stress, which is a topic that I frequently get to talk with my clients about. This is such an interesting time in all of our lives, when we certainly won't forget. And so we could all be forgiven for experiencing a lot of stress these days. And so what I was hoping to do is just share with you a few thoughts that I have that I've seen really make a big difference with my clients, and then just see if we could have a conversation. Just open it up. I really would love your questions about what I have to share with you, and I especially like the, well, hold on a second, I think you're nuts questions, because if there's just too ready agreement, then there's probably not a lot of new learning or insight. But if you're bumping up against an existing understanding, then you might just have some big questions. So I really welcome any and all questions, any flavors. So Mario, anything else before I get going, or?
Nope. Over to you.
All right, thanks. Well, one of the things that the description of this little gathering, had to do with coping with stress. And I think we can all be forgiven for, saying, boy, I'd love to know how to cope with stress. But I actually would like to point in a slightly different direction, because I think that with a different understanding of how our minds work, that we don't need to cope with stress, and we experience it very differently. And so I want to tell you kind of a funny story that I think helps illustrate this. And it goes a little like this, that, I know several of you are parents, and you may have kids of different ages, but if you can picture, you've got we'll say an 8 or 9 year old child, and this person says to you, Mom, there's a monster under my bed. And I can hear it breathing, and it's just scaring the pants off of me, and I don't really know what to do. Well, as a parent, we can be well-intentioned, but if we don't really know all the options available to us, I think a lot of times we come up with stuff like the following, like, okay, honey, well, here's what you can do. You can get a running start, and you can just run, and jump into your bed. And that way the monster will not reach you, cannot grab your feet, okay? Or you might say, well, sweetie, I've got this great monster stick, and I'm gonna give it to you, okay? And anytime you feel like the monster is sneaking out from under the bed, you just whack it with this stick, and it can't fight back. This is this awesome magic monster stick, okay? Now, in both cases, okay, this child might feel comforted, okay? Oh, thank you, because I had no idea what to do. I was just petrified, okay? But in both cases, we're still saying to this sweet human being, there is a monster under the bed, okay? And I think that that's unfortunately what happens with a lot of the messages we're given in our culture around stress. Yes, there is this monster called stress. And if you just do the following things, you might be able to beat it back or leap over it, and it won't be able to get you quite as badly or as often. And what I want to say is that our understanding of stress, if it shifts through an understanding of how our minds work, well, then we stop looking for ways to cope with it, and we start to see it for what it is, and our experience of it really shifts and changes pretty dramatically. So one of the things in terms of that I think is really helpful to share with people about how our minds work is that we grow up in what I call an outside-in world, where there's so many messages, well-intentioned, that say, the world is what we make of our circumstances. And sometimes life can be really hard, and what you need to do is, work on yourself and steel yourself and, keep putting in the effort to overcome the circumstances. Now, I'm not denying that circumstances in life, can sometimes be hard, sometimes be wonderful. But I am saying that I think that understanding that life is what happens to us is completely wrong. And one of the ways that it's occurred to me to kind of share how it looks to me through this understanding is to think about a pair of sunglasses. I've got an actual pair of these that I like to mountain bike with that, they're called, photochromatic, right? So they change, they lighten and darken with the brightness out, right? Now, I think that we have lenses onto the world that are just like that are constantly, without us doing anything, are constantly lightening and darkening. And so the very same circumstances that are in front of us can sometimes look very dark and overwhelming and scary. And other times we can feel like, oh, no big deal, or matter of fact, or even hopeful or excited about the exact same circumstances. So one of the things that that Mario is aware of in terms of what's going on in my life is that my wife had the unfortunate accident in early January of getting basically run over by a horse. And she sustained a brain injury. And we're almost 5 months into it, and she still has not healed very much. And she's still unable to do kind of some of the basics of life. I mean, she can eat and she can talk and she can clothe herself and things like that, but she can't really carry on much of a conversation right now, and she can't really walk more than 2 minutes down the driveway, and she's very limited in what she can do. And so, I'm sharing this with you to say that I'm in the midst of some circumstances that are not kind of happy circumstances. And yet, an understanding of where my experience of life comes from has been this unbelievable gift, because I can see that my lenses are changing all the time, even if the circumstances of my wife's recovery are not. And so there can be some days when I'm really sad and upset and overwhelmed. But if I felt like I had to cope with the circumstances, I think I would feel much more daunted by what's in front of me. And it would take me out of the moment, and it would get me worried about the future and all this stuff that I have no control over. But in understanding that life comes from the inside out, and my lenses are changing all the time without me having to do anything, opens up the possibility for me that even in the midst of a terrible day, I can have a wonderful experience of feeling deeply connected to my wife, or profoundly in love with her and grateful for her. I can share a laugh with one of my boys. I can look out the window at this gorgeous place we live in and appreciate the spectacular beauty. And then, so the image that has been so valuable to me is of something that, I'm hoping most of us might be familiar with, which is the toy that I grew up with in the 70s, the Weebles. The Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. I have one on my desk, and I can go get it if you're unfamiliar with it. But basically, it's this egg-shaped toy that will wobble, but because the design of the Weeble, it will always come back and be balanced again. And an inside-out understanding of life says that, yes, we bump up against hard things all the time, but that the way we are designed as human beings is that we've got resilience built into us. Just like the design of the Weeble, that we can get knocked over, but no matter how much we get knocked over, if we get out of our own way, eventually it comes back to center. And so that image has been incredibly helpful to me during this time when I feel like, yeah, my wife's getting no sleep some nights, and her brain is scrambled and all this, and it can look to me like life is really hard in this moment. But when I'm reminded that what's built into me and to her and to all of us is this resilience, I know that this moment will pass, my state of mind will shift and change, and I will inevitably see things a new way. And it's not like I have to work at it. In fact, the less I work at it sometimes, the more quickly I return to that state of balance and clarity. So I've got lots more to say about this, but I just want to keep it really simple, because the more we think that there's a monster under the bed, the more we think we need to develop strategies and techniques. And what we'll find is that sometimes those strategies and techniques work, and sometimes they don't. Okay? And I often will talk with people who say, well, I had this thing that worked for a while, but then it stopped working, and now I don't know what to do. And that's because they think they need a new strategy for dealing with the monster under the bed. And so when we talk about, well, actually, there's something other than strategies and techniques that's about understanding the way our minds work to explain our experience of life. And that understanding gives us the insight we need to recognize what's available to us in times of stress. So, as I mentioned at the outset, this is something that I think is very, very different than what we grow up with, what we marinate in our society. And so what I might be sharing with you today might sound like, might sound nuts. You might have lots of questions, or it might sound like, well, yeah, of course. But regardless, I'd love to just pause here and just say, what are your questions so far? And maybe we could have a conversation.
So I'm imagining a conversation with a Main Street business owner who's uncertain whether they're going to open up, whether their life nest egg is going to disappear in the next month.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how to finish the question. How is it possible, this is sort of being devil's advocate, for that person to see this as other than a concrete, tangible disaster for him or herself and family?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question, and kind of an obvious one for our times right now.
Yeah.
Right? So here's what here's what makes sense to me about the way our minds work. And maybe each of you can relate to this in your own way. That there are times when when our minds are so busy, okay, that we cut ourselves off from our own genius, our own brilliance, our own insight, right? Now, it can be really extreme, and we can, get paralyzed with fear and worry. We can be running around, like chickens with our heads cut off. Now, what happens is, I don't often put it this way, but this is the way it's occurring to me today. When our minds get really busy and our lenses get really dark, we actually get stupider. Okay? Now, that's not a place where we want to make big life decisions from. Okay? And what we all have access to any moment is a clearer mind where, to stick with my rough vernacular, we get smarter, right? And so if I'm that Main Street business owner, well, I would want to give myself the opportunity to make decisions, to tap into my creativity, my brilliance, my new thinking, fresh thinking, a sense of hopefulness and possibility. I would want to make decisions from there rather than from, if you'll pardon me, the oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit place, right? Because that's a place that's very constricted and where I don't see hope and possibility, right? And so what I get to talk to my clients about is when we understand that there's nothing to do, if we just understand that we go like this all the time, if we see that that's the natural state of human affairs, then we can kind of see that really low gripped state of mind as no big deal. It's what humans do. And it passes more quickly. The weeble bounces back. But when we're in that place and we're like, I just have to bear down and work harder and dig in deeper and lean in and all that stuff about, effort and bearing down, well, that keeps the weeble kind of pushed down. It's when we lift our hand away that the weeble finds its way back up. So that's what I would say is understanding how we access our intelligence, our training, our past experience, as well as our new thinking. So there's nothing wrong with looking kind of to what we've done before, but when we're faced with kind of unprecedented challenges, that's the time to look to new thinking. And new thinking doesn't come from a constricted, low state of mind place. It comes from allowing our minds to open up. So does that help in some way, Mario?
It does. I have many conversations with people in that situation, and I'm never quite sure what to say in response.
Yeah, well, it can be a little counterintuitive for folks who are, to whom the world, the answer looks like, well, I got here with hard work, so the only way I'm going to move forward is with even harder work. And I can understand, and people can be forgiven for thinking that, but I think that's a misunderstanding of how our minds actually work. And so when we get to see that in our own experience, if we just look to when have I had great ideas, when have I had insights that were kind of breakthrough thoughts, really new ideas, over and over and over again, people describe that those things happen almost all the time. They come unbidden when our minds are relaxed. They don't come when we're under tremendous pressure, right? So it's really helpful to step back and understand the bigger picture of how our minds work And then we get to work in harmony with that rather than working against that and wondering why isn't it working out any better for me. So what other questions? Softballs or fastballs? What is anything at all?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you have ways, I know you said the less you work at it, the easier it becomes, or the more you work at it, the harder it is. But do you have techniques or things that you suggest to people that are kind of stuck in that dark view to help them transition out of it? You know, sometimes it's hard. You just be like, oh, just change your viewpoint. Isn't always that easy.
Yeah.
Do you have like little actions or techniques that you recommend or suggest?
Yeah, that's a great question, Carly. And I'm going to elaborate, but the short answer is no, because I think that's like saying, let me give you a monster stick. Okay. The longer answer is I'd like to share with you why I'm saying that. Okay. Why I think an understanding makes more sense. Okay. So I'm just making this up. I've never said this before. It's just, this is what occurs to me right now. Okay. Let's say you are, let's see, I think in a few days, it's supposed to be, you know, like, I don't know, mid to high 70s, right? And beautiful. Okay. So let's just say you have an opportunity and you are, you decide you're going to lie out in the sun in your backyard. Okay. I don't know if you have a backyard or what, but if you're just going to lie out in the sun in your backyard. Okay. Well, 45 minutes later, you are finding that you are really hot and uncomfortable, okay? Because we live at altitude and all the reasons you know, okay? Well, your question, and I don't mean this in a demeaning or condescending way, your question sounds to me like, well, Jason, what would you recommend that I do in that situation? Okay, what techniques would you have for cooling down? And I'm saying that you understand how, in this case, something as kind of, I don't know, weirdly basic as like heat works, and you're gonna do what occurs to you. So you're gonna either put some more clothes on, or you're gonna go inside, or you're gonna put a, you know, wet towel. I mean, there's dozens of things you can do to cool off, right? But you will know what to do. You won't sit there saying, I just don't know what to do. So, you know, 3 hours later, I'm burnt to a crisp, right? And so the same thing looks true to me about the more we understand how our minds work, the more we understand that, oh my gosh, my mind is overheating right now, right? Well, what should I do when my mind overheats? Well, I don't do the same thing every time. I do what occurs to me. So sometimes if I have the opportunity, I love mountain biking. Well, I'll go for a mountain bike ride, but sometimes I don't have that opportunity. So sometimes I might just get on with life. Sometimes I might just, that awareness that my mind is overheating might be enough. Sometimes I might, I don't know. I mean, sometimes I might, well, I had a client one time that she was asking me the same question about what do I do? And she was this high powered, she worked at a big engineering firm in Manhattan. And there was this woman who was constantly kind of, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Stalking her, like following her around constantly and asking her all these questions and will you please help me? And also, and my client was like, I don't know how to deal with this woman, right? And so she was asking me, you know, can you give me some techniques? And I said, well, if you notice your mind overheating, I bet something will occur to you. So the next week we had our call and I said, how's it going? And she said, well, you wouldn't believe what happened. I said, what happened? She said, well, this woman was following me around. So finally I was like, well, where can I go where she might not follow me around? Well, I went to the ladies' room. And I said, okay, great. And she said, and what occurred to me was just to run my hands under hot water because something about that just you know, that sensory experience, just, it kind of interrupted the overheating thinking, right? And so the way the conversation went next was we had a good chuckle about, well, it's not like she and I are going to team up and write a book that says, here's what everyone needs. Go to the bathroom and run your hands under hot water, right? What she saw that was so liberating was the moment she recognizes what's going on with her mind, she gives herself the opportunity to tap into her own wisdom about what makes sense in that moment and in that situation. And so that's what I'm pointing to, Carly, that's so powerful, is that when you start to get a feel for, and you probably already do, you probably already can tell, like, I know, I call it the rumble strip, right? The signs that I'm like going off the road mentally, right? Like I get really hyper focused on my task list. I kind of lose my sense of humor. I get pretty serious. I feel my body gets kind of tight. All these things are my rumble strip that don't prevent me from going off track, but they're kind of my opportunity to bring awareness to the situation and say, would you like to keep going in this direction? Fine if you want to, but here's your opportunity to notice how it's working. And that awareness, the moment I have it, I'm like, oh, right. Yeah, maybe I need to get up and walk away. Maybe I need to walk twice around my office building. I mean, whatever it is, I'm not going to write a book and say, this is what everyone should do. What everyone should do is trust their own wisdom when they understand how their minds work. That's a book I'd like to write.
That'd be a good one. So I have a staff, it's pretty small staff, but as a person in charge of other people, how about like delivering this idea to them or to just anybody else who might deliver this idea to other people?
Yeah.
It's instead of saying, here, go take, run your hands under hot water.
Yeah, of course. Well, Carly, that's a great question. And, what I would say is that, well, okay, so I have, I've had a client for a number of years who runs an organization with 175 employees. And she was so enamored of what she was learning about the way our minds work that she said, you have to come out to California and talk to all my employees. Now, I was happy to do that, but the employees had no idea why I was coming out there to talk to them, okay? And long story short, I'd say it's probably the worst professional public speaking, sharing experience I've ever had, okay? Because they were basically being told, this is what you need to know, right? Now, what I shared with my client afterwards was, the more you just share this through your own understanding, your own actions, you will create fertile ground in your organization for this, okay? Now, don't get me wrong. There's a way to come into an organization that has to do with understanding what are the pain points for people in the organization and tying this understanding to those pain points. But without that, it's just information, right? And so there's a real difference between sharing with people a feeling that you're coming from that says, I understand that human beings go up and down all the time, right? Another client of mine said to me, I had someone in my office who was, basically freaked out at work, and I needed to have a conversation with her because it was really unacceptable behavior. But what I saw was that she was just in a low state of mind with those really dark glasses on, And I had compassion for her because that's a human experience. And I didn't think that's who she was and that we needed to create this, you know, big program to fix it. I just came from a compassionate place, and her state of mind rose. And then we had a very different conversation, and she naturally saw for herself what was going on. Now that was, I think, a very skillful way to share this understanding, you know, to be very compassionate. So I don't think there's any harm in sharing this understanding. So I want to be really clear, but if it's just information, it doesn't have anything behind it. But if it's something that really has meant something, you know, to someone in an organization, then that's what you share. You share what you see. You share how this understanding, you know, if you get an insight about, well, this really has shifted the way I might respond to stressful situations, right? So I'm just talking in a very practical way about, I wouldn't want it to backfire by just saying, well, here's something that sounds like another technique, right? Because in my experience, that's a surefire way for this to fall on deaf ears. But to see that there's something more powerful and that it's okay to just live with it yourself and experiment with it and see what it feels like, and then share your experience, whether it's through words or actions. I think in the long run, that's the most effective way to share. And what's happened with my organizational clients is I often start working with the leadership team, and their experience is so transformed, not only of their work, but of their family and home lives too, that their state of mind rises, and other people in the organization start noticing and being affected by that. And they start to get curious. They start to say, well, I'd kind of like to have what she's having, right? And once they're curious, well, now their minds are open. I want to know what Carly seems a lot lighter lately, right? Now there's an openness. Now there's a real opportunity to share. But I think if you come in too strong before that, you're kind of inoculating people maybe against understanding, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question. All right. What else is on your mind? What else are you wondering about?
I guess to Carly's question, I'll ask a follow-up question. So if she wanted, because one thing, if I were in her position that I would maybe try is asking for feedback from those staff members, maybe of saying something to the effect of, hey, I'm working on trying to not get really stuck in my mind when I'm frustrated or stressed, and if you notice that, feel free to point it out or to say to me, hey, it looks like you're stuck. I wonder if that would be a good starting point. Just an idea.
Yeah. Well, Lauren, thanks for that question. And it's understandable why that might look like a helpful idea. Now, I would just say, to put it, to kind of turn it around, if you've had, let's say, less than a desirable amount of sleep with your child, okay, and you're feeling pretty crabby, okay, and Tim says to you, Lauren, this is one of those times when you just seem like you're kind of caught up in your thinking, right? Well, generally speaking, people, when they're in a low state of mind, don't respond well to feedback, okay? It's just, that's one of the symptoms that's always true when we start to get a deeper understanding of state of mind, right? So from how the world looks to me, a lot of business practices are totally counterproductive, okay? So I actually wouldn't recommend inviting that kind of feedback, because that's like saying, hey, I'd like everyone to kick me when I'm down. Okay. Is that cool? You know, instead, I think what's more helpful is to just start noticing.
Mm-hmm.
Noticing has such an incredible power in it. And that awareness that we bring to our own state of mind is far more valuable. So I can notice, not all the time, believe me, but I can notice more and more. Oh, right, I've got the dark glasses on. That's why, you know, the people in my office look totally incompetent today, right? And so that is so helpful, because I start to see, oh, right, I recognize I kind of feel less compassion and understanding and collegiality when my state of mind is low. Well, isn't that interesting? So if I let that pass and I let my state of mind naturally come back again, I bet I will have new ideas about how to interact with my coworkers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's so much simpler than, you know, than we can sometimes make it. That if we just start by noticing our state of mind and not having anything be wrong with the fact that human beings go up and down. I go up and down, you go up and down, everybody goes up and down. And if it doesn't look like a problem, then I get to just experience, oh, right, when I'm in this place, I tend to feel like the victim, and it feels like people are doing stuff to me, right? Oh, if I let that feeling pass, oh, I don't feel like the victim anymore, and I feel much more creative and resourceful.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like the wisdom, which is not, you know, that you've heard before, which is like, you know, if you write that angry email, sleep on it, right? Well, that's just an acknowledgement that our state of mind shifts and changes. And that you might write that email when you're feeling really low from a state of mind perspective. And not always, but often when we go to bed, we wake up the next day and we might be ever so slightly in a different place, or we might be a lot in a different place. And we think, oh, maybe I shouldn't send that. Or we think, oh, I'm going to take the stinger out of it, you know? So that's just a very practical everyday application of what I'm talking about. Is that's an example of noticing your own state of mind and trusting that as your head clears, you have your own wisdom that guides you, instead of the chorus saying, do it, do it. No, don't do it. Do it, do it. You know, you can trust your own wisdom.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Jenny, you're the only one left who still has your face up on the screen. So anything on your mind? I can.
I do know about Weeble Wobbles, just so you know that. So we're in the same age category.
Yeah.
And I wish I had thought about that a couple months ago, because it was very helpful what you said. I don't know. I mean, a lot of what you have said has resonated with me in the situation I'm in with being caught between two employment situations at the current moment. I think that, you know, what I see going on, I'll just think about the Center for the Arts staff, because they're mostly on my mind, because that's the most difficult situation I've ever seen a nonprofit go through. But it's just trying to, you know, dealing with a board of directors who are, you know, helping to manage the organization, and dealing with these staff that there's only 3 of them left out of 45 who have just this tremendous amount of stress placed on them, and how to help them effectively manage that stress. And for the most part, they do a great job, but there are days like today. I sat in a phone call with a donor, and after the donor heard this incredible presentation from their development director, he was like, wow, I hope I can get to the center this summer, because it sounds like that'll be the last time that I'll ever set foot in the center, basically implying that the doors were going to be closed. And she was devastated. I could tell just by the look on her face on the Zoom call and how her voice changed. And I was like, oh God, you know, and so I got on the phone with her after, and we talked about how, you know, it's one of 300 plus donors that the center has, and just how to work through that stress, whether it's the board president when he is just beside himself because he doesn't know what to do to be most effective in his position with the organization, or talking with donors. Some are very positive and upbeat, glass half full as opposed to glass half empty. So that's, you know, so I'm just trying to find ways to continue to help them manage their stress, because there's a lot of guilt involved with that too. If anything, that's more of what I feel. And I was, you know, born and raised Catholic, so just keep that in mind. There's that too, but just how to, you know, effectively manage all of that. And I think for the most part they do a good job, but it's been really trying. And so anyway, I appreciate everything you've said.
Well, thanks. Yeah, and there's no denying that, you know, that's a really challenging situation and you know, existential for that organization, and so the stakes can feel really high. Now, I guess what I would just add to what, you know, I've already said is that what is so counterintuitive, but that we've all had the experience of, is that the more those stakes look real and true, and the more they kind of fill the screen, okay, the less access we have to our creativity, the less access we have to our responsiveness, right? And so, you know, another common example that we can probably all relate to, you know, depending on how far back in our lives we reach, but, you know, going to a job interview, right? The more it looks like, oh my God, if I don't get this job, well, that depresses our capacity, right? And we tend not to be ourselves, not to be our best selves, and not to make the impression that we were hoping to make. Now, counterintuitively, when we say, well, I'm just gonna be me, do the best I can, and, you know, let the chips fall where they may, well, then we're much more able to kind of pivot and you know, handle the really out of left field interview question, and so on and so forth. And so, you know, so that frankly is no different than the situation that those remaining staff are under, which is the more pressured thinking we experience, we put on ourselves, okay? Now that doesn't mean that there aren't real circumstances. It doesn't mean that people don't really need jobs and that the Center for the Arts, you know, isn't a vital part of our community. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying that, just like I was saying, for example, with my wife's circumstances, those circumstances are real. And on some days they feel kind of dire, but the circumstances don't change day to day, moment to moment. My experience of them does. Mm-hmm. And that's all I'm pointing to. And that when I'm really feeling the pressure, oh my God, I have to make all these health decisions and she's not really a reliable partner in making decisions about her own health right now. Oh God, that feels like so much pressure. Well, then I drive myself nuts. And then there are other moments when I can see what's going on and I just come back to myself, the weeble, right? And it looks like, well, I'm just gonna, you know, with a clear head, I can only do the best I can. And this, I can tell the difference because it feels so different in my body and my mind. And so the circumstances of the financial situation of the Center for the Arts aren't changing day to day, moment to moment, but you and the remaining staff's thinking about it really does. And so just to have the awareness that we are more likely to come up with creative, out-of-the-box solutions, the less pressure we are putting on ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that just opens us up to the possibility. I'm never talking about positive thinking because that's trying to manage our thinking. And I don't subscribe to that. I'm just saying that when we understand how it works, we will begin to mistrust our low quality state of mind thoughts and just let those pass. And as we let them pass, we get access to something kind of new and more exciting.
Agreed. I liked your comment about, I'm paraphrasing, but something about when you're in periods of stress, you become stupid. Basically, I agree with that.
Yeah.
It's also getting the staff all on the same page, because what I see happen in times of stress, whether it's this situation or a different one, it's like you can't get everybody on the same page. You know, someone else is having a bad day. If you're not having a bad day and you're in that creative space and you're like, we got this, guys, we're doing it. You got someone else on the team going, oh, hell no, we can't do this. I'm done. You know, so it's always that constant trying to bring each other up to get everybody on the same playing field.
Yeah, and Jay, I'm glad you mentioned that, because to me, I see kind of a tactical fallacy that is very similar to positive thinking, where it's kind of like, well, I got to get my team fired up, right? Well, fired up is a combination in my mind of positivity and pressure, okay? And what I think is more helpful is for people's minds to relax, people's minds to open. So, you know, for example, I was talking about that client who last week was sharing with me this exchange she had with an employee who'd kind of blown up, right? Well, the way she dealt with that wasn't a big pep talk or a big, what should I say? What's the kind of business lingo? You know, it was understanding that as her mind settles down, she's going to see something new for herself. And so I think what's most helpful for leaders to see in this time when their staffs are so stressed out and under pressure is that the more we can support them to have their minds clear, whatever that might mean, and it might mean different things for different people, then we're going to see that they are then tapping in, they're moving away from being more stupid and they're moving towards being, more creative and brilliant. Right? And then you're getting so much more out of that human resource than when, unwittingly we're saying, come on, we can do this. It's like, well, if that is just maybe for some people making their minds even busier. I think Jenny's nuts. How can she possibly think that we can do this? There's all this stuff going on. But if instead I'm helping that person in their mind settle down, well, then they might have an idea that didn't occur to me, and that's what I think is so much more valuable right now, is understanding that with good intentions, we can sometimes speed people up. And now we've moved further away from what we want. If you see that, then it will occur to you what makes sense for your staff, because you know them best, about what could I do to help settle their minds down or encourage them to look in that direction. Mm-hmm. So thanks, Jenny. I really appreciate that example. And I'm sorry that you're going through that and you've got a lot on your plate. So, so you can call me anytime and I'd be glad to chat with you.
After listening to you, I thought I need therapy.
So, Lauren, if you don't mind, I'm gonna create a totally fictitious situation and then say, how do we get out of it? So maybe I'm having a lousy day. I'm working with Lauren and she says, I mean, we've both been in this workshop, so we recognize that you get stupider, then you get more stressed. And so I'm feeling really stressed and really stupid. And Lauren, because we're both here, says, go out and do some gardening, which is, of course, what I should do. But my response is instead, oh my God, I'm too busy. I don't have time to do any gardening. Damn it, Lauren. Don't you understand the kind of stress I'm under? So how could she respond to me and how could I respond to her in a situation like that? Because I think that happens an awful lot. I see my husband, who's at his most creative when he's chopping wood. But when he sits down and gets stuck when he's writing, to suggest he go out and chop wood, I get, that marital look that says, you don't have a clue how stressed out I am. And if you did, you wouldn't be suggesting something as mushy as that. So how do we game this through?
Yeah, thanks. That's another wonderful question. Well, this is This is how it looks to me, that there's kind of the content of what we're sharing, and there's the feeling behind it. Okay. So I can say to my wife, I love you. And it's really not that believable, right? Or I can just look at her sometimes and she knows I'm just filled with love. I don't need to say anything because there's a feeling behind it. Okay. So the reason I'm saying that is because I think often we're looking for the content of what to say to someone, when the more helpful thing is to recognize the feeling we're coming from. So if I were in Lauren's shoes in that hypothetical situation, I would recognize that I'm often in one of two places. I'm either in some kind of judgmental place where I'm like, God, if only Mario would get her act together, she would figure out that gardening would be really helpful right now. Or I can find myself in a compassionate place and I can say, oh my gosh, Mario's having a human experience just like I do all the time, where I can't see the forest for the trees. I'm just so caught up. Oh, poor gal. Now that feeling comes across, and it does not matter, or it matters very little what I'm saying if I'm coming from that place of compassion and understanding. And so all too often we're just looking in the wrong direction. And if we just recognize that the feeling communicates way more than the words or the content, I think you'd experience a very different outcome. So that exact example happens in my house from time to time. And if I say, I'm too busy to go for a bike ride, but thanks a lot for telling me, right? Well, if Sumaya will just say, okay, honey, and not like, okay, honey, God, and roll her eyes, but just be like, she knows that I will come back up again. She's not worried about me. She just feels compassion that right now I'm really caught up in my thinking. And when I feel that compassion, not all the time, but sometimes I'm like, yeah, maybe she's right. Maybe I just need to, and it shifts things. It's not an argument about who's right. It's coming from that feeling of compassion and understanding. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, very much. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm at the end of my allotted time, and I want to thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate you taking this time, each of you, and especially in these really unusual times. It gives me great pleasure to support people with this understanding. So if anybody here today or any of your colleagues, if it would be beneficial, I'm offering pro bono. I'm happy to just share this understanding, because I think that, one of my secret wishes is that if we can lift the mental health and the well-being of the Valley, boy, we all benefit. So I would be more than happy to meet with any of you anytime over Zoom or as things allow in person. And that's just, it brings me great joy to share this understanding, because it really can change lives in such a powerful way. So thanks for giving me this opportunity today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. It was wonderful.
You're always inspiring. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot. All right.
So,
well,
Thank you.
hang in there, everyone. You're doing wonderful work, and I'm often struck by just what an amazing crew we have in this Valley doing the hard work every day. So I'm rooting for you. I really am.
Thank you. And we for you and your family too. So thank you everybody for being here. The week after next, if all goes well, our topic is going to be collaboration, which is one of the words that's being used to death right now and is code for just about everything from you are my funder, therefore you collaborate with me, to we're taking out a joint ad in the Country Times, therefore we're collaborators, all the way up to the most complex understanding of the term. So tentatively we have the Forest Service, the BLM, and the Upper Gunnison River District have had a formal collaboration for several years now, in which they're sharing the responsibilities for the money, the resources, hiring the staff, but there's all those delicate relationships. You've got to, you know, I hired the staff, but he's responsible to you. How does that work? So it will be an interesting look at what a collaboration can be and some frank conversations about the complications of making it work. Stay tuned. And meanwhile, thank you again, Jason. This was just great. And thanks to you all for being here today.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.